building a better Bay Area. Moving forward, finding solutions. This is ABC 7 News.
Hi there, I'm Kristen Z. You're watching Getting Answers live on ABC 7. We ask experts your questions every day at 3 to get answers for you in real time. Education wars heating up. Florida has just banned dozens of math books over what the governor calls dangerous and divisive concepts, including SEL. That's social and emotional learning, something more and more Bay Area school districts are incorporating into their curriculum. So what is it exactly? We'll talk with an expert from the Institute for Social and Emotional Learning. Also, just when you think traveling can't get any worse, more mass delays and cancellations this past weekend as more passengers take to the sky, even as airlines continue to struggle with staffing. Will it be utter chaos this summer? And what are your rights? We'll talk with a leading travel analyst. But first, COVID resurgence. Philadelphia today began reinforcing its reinstated indoor mask mandate, even as the city is hit by a lawsuit from businesses. And today, a federal court in Florida strikes down the Biden administration's airplane masking rule, saying the CDC's mask extension for 2 more weeks was done capriciously and without authority. Joining us now to discuss the latest in COVID developments is UCSF epidemiologist Dr. George Rutherford. Dr. Rutherford, it's been a while. Always great to see you.
Thank you, Kristen. Good to see you, too.
All right, so look, a lot has changed, but then a lot hasn't changed. We're still fighting major battles over masks. Do you think we're at a point in the battle against COVID mask mandates where the mask mandates are still necessary at a time when cases are creeping up, but hospitalizations are not? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to depend on the local epidemiology and local transmission patterns. I think they're pretty unnecessary now in most of California. There are situations in which, people would probably want to wear masks, and we shouldn't stop them from doing it. But, to move from recommendations or strong recommendations to requirements is sort of a different, it's a different ball game. And right now I'm pretty comfortable with masks being strongly recommended in certain situations where we used to require them and really not require them that frequently.
Look, it seems like there's still not total agreement on whether we should care about case counts at all or only about hospitalizations and deaths.
No. Yeah.
Where are we at with that? No, I just want to know. Why is there no consensus?
Oh, I think there is consensus. Not to contradict you.
Oh, good.
I think
Actually,
there is.
I love it when you contradict me, but I want to hear why.
What are you talking about? Yeah. I think that there is, the case counts are becoming increasingly distant from reality because of home testing and because Omicron doesn't cause lots of symptoms and often is asymptomatic. People who are asymptomatic are seldom diagnosed with infection. People who are mildly symptomatic may just test themselves at home, and if they're positive, they don't report it. So case counts are iffy, but I think you can follow them. I think you can follow the trends in case counts, and that those are those give you a pretty good indication. We also look at proportion of tests that are positive, as well as all the kind of hospital parameters you mentioned.
And the test positivity, I hear, is creeping up, right? Feel free to contradict me again, because that would mean I'm learning, which I always appreciate. Okay. But I guess what I'm seeing is, look, if cases are going up and the actual number is actually way higher, because a lot of people simply aren't testing now, so that suggests there are actually a lot of cases floating out there, yet the hospitalizations are kept really, really low. Does that suggest we have now moved into endemic stage?
It's one explanation. It's one possible explanation for it. The other explanation is just hasn't caught up yet. Hospitalizations lag a couple of weeks beyond peak transmissions. So, I mean, I think we'd have to rule that out first before we could, proclaim semi-victory. I think for right now, though, there is transmission going on. There are cases out there. There's infection out there, and you need to be careful. You know what to do. You can wear masks, you can socially distance, you can avoid certain situations, you can get your vaccines and boosters. There are lots of things you can do to prevent, to not acquire this. And until we know a lot more about long-term COVID, the long hauler syndrome, I think it's prudent not to get this, to try and avoid it at all costs.
when you say when we know more about long haul, for example, that makes me wonder, are you saying that, because a lot of people have mild or asymptomatic cases right now, right?
Yeah.
So could those folks still get long COVID or even serious long COVID? Are you saying we don't have a verdict on that?
We don't have a verdict on that. So
Okay.
I think the answer needs to be maybe.
Okay.
An
Clear as
unequivocal
day, you know, and I get it. I get it. It's just that, you know, in a new survey, 9% of Americans say COVID is a serious crisis still, right? 73% now say it's a manageable problem. I wonder if you agree with that, especially,
Well, I think it's,
right? Do you agree with that?
oh yeah, I agree with that. I think it's a manageable problem, but we have to remind people how to manage it, which is to get your vaccines first and foremost, to stay home if you're sick, to get yourself tested if you're sick, and to you know, and to be prudent about avoiding large indoor crowds. And if there's are guarantees that everybody's vaccinated or people are wearing masks or they've been symptom screened before coming in, that's one thing. That's fine. That's like what the Warriors do and the big you know, the big theater companies. But I think it's you know, if you're going into some crowded bar to watch the ball game on TV and nobody has a mask on, and you're standing, you know, 6 inches away from everybody around you, that's a very different situation. And those are the sorts of things that I think they're probably prudently best avoided.
But that is happening on a wide basis.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah,
proms
for
are
sure.
happening. You know, I hear of local schools that have an outbreak after the prom. You know, you might go to an awards dinner, a professional dinner, and there are 300 people, one person being masked out of the whole, you know, audience there.
Yeah.
So in fact, people are doing the kind of things that would expose them and make them susceptible to catching it. But if they're vaccinated and boosted, should they feel that that's okay to do and fairly safe to do right now?
I think it's fairly safe to do right now. It depends on what the background transmission rates are. If we have 10
Like
times
here.
as many cases all of a sudden here in San Francisco, then that's a different question. But I think right now, given where we are, even though it's bouncing up and down, granted,
Yeah.
I think that we're in good enough shape that if you've been vaccinated and boosted, you're going to be in pretty good. You're going to have, your risk is going to be as low as we can make it without sort of hermetically sealing you off.
Okay, I do know a lot of people who are kind of waiting on getting their second booster, even older folks.
Yeah.
What is your thought on that? I mean, if people got boosted in November or December, like a lot of people did the first time, would that have waned by now? Should they get a second?
You've been reading my vaccine card. I think you should, if you're over 50, I think you should get it, or if you have immunocompromised, I think absolutely you should get a second vaccine. The timing, though, is a different issue. This vaccine is going to give you a boost for a couple of months. So I, for instance, am going to be traveling in later May and June and July. I'm probably going to wait till early May to get mine, just so I have, you know, so I'm having kind of peak protection in the period of peak exposure when I'm out traveling. So I think that, you know, there's some timing issues, but if you're not traveling and your risk isn't going to change over time, I think it's probably you should get it sooner than later.
Okay. I am going to follow your timeline there, Dr. Rutherford. There's a new study I just read about that alarms me a little bit. Unvaccinated people infected with Omicron unlikely to develop immunity that will help protect them against other variants. You know, is that true? Because if so, that's kind of worrisome because we kind of depend on that immunity from infection as a society.
Well, I think what they're talking about are prior variants, and we're not, you know, this thing doesn't go in reverse. You know, you can't put the virus in reverse and drive backwards. Clearly, the earlier Omicron strains protect against the BA2, the current strain. So that's good news. What's coming next? We don't know. If we continue to evolve the Omicron variant to something beyond BA2, there's a BA3, for instance, floating around. You know, that's okay. I think we'll have good cross immunity from that. If it comes out to be something completely different, like Delta or Omicron, where they're completely different, then, you know, how much natural immunity protects, how much the vaccine protects, those are very open questions.
All right, Dr. George Rutherford, always great talking with you. Thanks so much for your time today.
Good to see you.
All right, coming up next, there's another political battle in the classroom. This one is over math books, but also over social and emotional learning. We'll be right back. All right, everybody. Hope you had a good weekend. Happy Easter and whatever you celebrate. There are a lot of different holidays, and hopefully it was a good one for you. And here is a lovely shot of Mount Tam before the rain returns to the Bay Area. In the latest political war over education, Florida has banned some 50 math textbooks. Governor Ron DeSantis says they introduce dangerous and divisive ideas, including critical race theory and SEL, that's short for social and emotional learning. While critical race theory has been widely reported on, SEL has not gotten as much attention until today. Yet it is a framework that many Bay Area schools have embraced in recent years. Joining us now to help us understand SEL is the executive director and co-founder of the Bay Area-based Institute for Social and Emotional Learning, Nick Haisman-Smith. Nick, how are you? Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Kristen. Yeah, I'm very well, thank you.
All right, so tell us, what is social and emotional learning?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think the misunderstanding is probably at the root of some of these discussions today. So from our perspective at the Institute, the SEL is an approach for teaching and learning that says, look, we care deeply for our students' well-being, for their sense of connection, for their sense of belonging. And as we design school, as we do school, we're going to put that belief at the heart of all that we do. Because we know that unless we get that right, unless we've got our kids showing up to school, feeling empowered, feeling a strong sense of themselves, they're not going to do their best in everything they try and learn during their days at school. So it's really putting that belief at the core of things. And it goes beyond that even further to say that, you know, there are skills that we can teach kids. There are very practical, easy to implement skills, practices, and tools that kids can learn, just as they do in math or in science or in other subjects. And those are the skills and the tools that are really going to empower them to be successful in their learning, but also into their life beyond school.
That's what I want to dive into a little deeper. I know that your institute helps school districts and educators around the world adopt this SEL framework, and we know some of those schools are in the Bay Area. So give us an example, for example, right? How does it work when a school, for example, does incorporate SEL? Like, let's say the kids are involved in a conflict or a situation they cannot resolve. How do you use that? How does it translate into a tool in that moment?
Yeah, a great question. So you can think of this really as both proactive and responsive work with kids. So we really like to make sure that all the schools that we work with are teaching kids the skills of social emotional learning upfront proactively. So that might be helping them understand and manage their emotions, the big feelings that they might have. For example, let's say frustration or anger. Those feelings that are totally normal, totally natural for us as humans to have, but let's give kids some tools to manage those, to be able to name it. There's a great phrase, which is name it to tame it. And if we can help kids understand their feelings and name it, that's halfway to helping them understand.
Can we do it? Give me something to do. Let's say I'm a kid involved in let's say you hurt my feelings, Nick. Help me get the words to kind of get my emotions out there to resolve this.
Absolutely. So in the younger grades, first, second, third grade, we will be helping kids with the language of an I message, the really basic idea of speaking from the I perspective. So sharing something like, I feel frustrated, or I felt upset when whatever happened, and what I need or what I want to be different is this. And you would,
and then
help
I
kids
would not say an I message like, I want you to go away, or I want you to shut up. I would say what to you back?
Yeah, so kids may well say that, because we don't always get this right. But often you'll find when kids have learned this, that they will hear that language and it will give them a chance to pause, to reflect and to acknowledge perhaps what they said might have hurt that person or upset them in some way. But if you take this into the older grades, it gets really interesting, because we will teach the older grades kind of the same skills, but we take it to the language of kind of assertive communication that probably you and I and many people listening and watching will have been trained in. There's a great story of a parent who came home from work and was telling their kids over the dinner table about a course they'd been on that day at work about kind of communication and conflict resolution, and mentioned, she had been trained in this assertive communication, and her daughter, who was in 6th grade, said, "Hey, Mum, we learned that in 3rd grade." And that's what I really think it is kind of skills for lifelong success that we can teach kids from a young age.
Nick, is there data that suggests that having SEL tools could help in academics or personal success?
Yeah, there is. It's pretty widespread research that has been happening for the last 15, 20 years, that if you invest in social emotional learning in your schools, kids will do better in their tests. They'll be more engaged in their learning. They will enjoy learning much more. They'll ask better questions. But it goes beyond just academics, right? It goes into helping with kids' mental health. We know this pandemic has really been intense for our young people's mental health.
Yeah.
But by helping kids with their emotional vocabulary and some of these techniques that we've mentioned, we're getting ahead of some of those issues. SEL has also been shown to kind of improve life satisfaction, college graduation rates, a really wide range of outcomes that I think we can all, regardless of our sort of views on the world, we can all get behind being important for our kids.
We don't have too much time, so I don't want to dive too deeply into it, but I want to quickly touch on, you mentioned the misconception out there, as Florida is kind of tying it to SEL to critical race theory, the idea that our history of racism here continues to reflect and impact American society in different ways. I guess I'm not seeing the connection. I mean, are they pointing to some of the issues that have come up with regard to privilege, or perhaps it's, gender identification? Is it that type of thing?
I think there are a lot of questions about this critique that maybe don't quite add up when you look at the reality of what SEL is and how it's being taught in schools. I would say that there is a range of what SEL is. It's not just one program or one approach. There are many different types of SEL. I think our belief is that SEL is about empowering kids to understand themselves, understand each other, and end up making good decisions for the world around them. Part of that is understanding their identity and deepening that experience, understanding each other's identities and different perspectives that people might have on topics. But it stays pretty far away from my perspective, anything that's sort of pushing a particular agenda.
Yeah. Well, if you look at some of the viral videos out there these days, it seems like everybody, including those of us who are out of school adults, can use a little more social and emotional learning training. So Nick Haisman-Smith from the Bay Area-based Institute for Social and Emotional Learning, thank you so much for explaining that, and I hope folks will turn to your institute as a resource to learn more. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Coming up next, the friendly skies, or unfriendly skies, if you will. Numerous flight cancellations, massive cancellations, in fact. We'll dig into what's behind the latest travel nightmare when we come back. All right, everybody, thanks for joining us. Hope you enjoyed that conversation. Right now, we have a lovely shot of the East Bay Hills, where still looks dry now, but Spencer Christian's working up his forecast. Things are going to be changing very soon. So, yeah. Yep, stick around for the 4. Be right back. Travel feels like it's back, with passenger levels reaching pre-pandemic levels for the holiday weekend. But flying the friendly skies has never been less friendly, with airline delays or canceling many flights. Most recently, it was JetBlue that went through a travel nightmare. Joining us now is Henry Hartefeld. He is a travel analyst for Atmosphere Research. Henry, great to have you back. Look, let's start with masks, okay? Because there was a court ruling out of Florida today, federal court, that struck down the CDC, the Biden administration mandate for airplanes and public transit. And ABC News just reported a short time ago that TSA is no longer going to enforce the requirement at airports and on transit. So what do you think is going to happen? What should we be prepared for if I'm jumping on a plane tomorrow?
So if you are traveling this afternoon or tomorrow in the next few days, you probably will not need to wear a mask, but my advice to you is bring one and be prepared to put it on in case this decision changes. We've had a bit of seesawing, if you will, going back and forth since the federal judge in Florida issued the ruling. Some airlines said that they were going to enforce the mask until the TSA issued its own guidance. This just a few minutes ago, as you said, the TSA said they will no longer, for the time being, enforce this mask wearing requirement. So if you're flying, if you're taking Muni, BART, or other transit, a bus, a train, no masks are required right now.
Can individual transit systems still impose it anyway?
So that's a very good question. It is possible for a transit system or an airline, an airport, a bus company, Amtrak, to make their own decisions. Remember, before we had the Biden administration ruling on this, where the TSA said masks must be worn, individual airlines had their own policies about wearing masks. It is possible some airlines may choose to do this, but to be very honest, in talking with airlines, I don't think they're going to enforce it if the TSA isn't.
All right. I'm just a little afraid that this choose your own adventures path could lead to a lot more battles. I don't want any more of those viral clips of people yelling at each other on the planes.
Well, the good news is that honestly, if masks are not required, it becomes a matter of personal choice. If you want to wear a mask, you may. However, people who don't want to wear masks, at least for the time being, will not be forced to do so. And you can't tell them they have to as another passenger.
Okay. Henry, thank you for clarifying that. I want to get to another issue that's plaguing travelers. We've seen so many delays every weekend. This past weekend, holiday weekend, no exception. Cancellations, tons of them. And we know why. We know they cut down on staff during the pandemic. We know they're ramping back up. We know there's so many travelers in the sky. What I want to know from you is, now what, right? Is this something that is going to get fixed quickly, or is this going to last all summer?
Kristen, the answer to that is yes and yes. Yes, things are going to get, I hope, better, but yes, we should expect that there will still be problems through the summer. The truth is, summer is a terrible time to travel in terms of weather. Always has been, always will be. You have thunderstorms and hurricanes and all sorts of other things that are very disruptive to air travel. That can't you can't get around that. But several airlines, including JetBlue, American, Southwest, and others, are scaling back the flights that they have planned for this summer. They're canceling their flights on less popular routes, less popular times, so that they can have more pilots, more flight attendants, and more airplanes on standby. They want to do that so that they can recover faster.
Okay, so given the situation, Henry, what do you advise people who are planning their summer travel? I mean, I'm starting to think of crazy ideas like, ooh, I should book a super cheap hotel for my first night in case I don't get there and have to eat that. I don't want to be out like $400. I only want to be out $100. Or maybe I just want to choose the airline that has multiple flights a day going to that destination, like things that I never thought of before.
Right, so I would say this. One of your ideas is really, really good. Take a look at who has the most flights to your destination, even if it's not an airline you normally fly, because if something goes wrong, they have the best ability to help you get where you're going. It may not be nonstop. It could be a connection through another city, another hub, but at least they can get you there. Go maybe a day, but if you are traveling for a wedding or a christening or a bar bat mitzvah or a cruise, get to your destination at least one day ahead of the event, if not two. You know, again, I respect everybody's budget and time, but you don't want to miss that event, and especially a cruise. You know, you once the ship sails, it's really hard to get on it. You have to fly to the next port.
All right,
so
Henry Hartefeld, do not go away. I know you got more great ideas, which let's discuss on Facebook Live. Got to do a short break on the air. All right, Henry, sorry we had to take this off air, but we're still on live, Facebook Live, where we stream, and also YouTube. You'll find us on our streaming app as well. So tell us, so give us more good ideas to protect ourselves in this crazy age of travel.
Right, so in this crazy age of travel, Kristen, what you need to do is think of worst case scenarios. You know, you mentioned book an inexpensive hotel for your first night. I would say this, make sure you book hotel rates that can be canceled without penalty, and double check what that cancellation penalty is. Because some hotels require just 24 hours, some may require 2 or more days in advance to cancel. So that's something to be considered. The other thing that I would say is look into flight insurance, but some insurance policies may not cover COVID, for example. So take a look at what is covered and what is not covered in case of a cancellation.
Okay. I don't know if, you know, airlines have never done this, but on social, I've seen a lot of people complain about, oh, you know, I had to pay for a 3 nights hotel because that's when, you know, JetBlue booked me for 3 nights from now, and I don't get anything for it. They're not paying for my hotel. Is that something that was never done before, or are they just getting cheaper and cheaper in terms of compensation? And is there any recourse?
Right. So you know what, when an event is outside the control of an airline, like bad weather, an airline is not obligated to reimburse you for hotel or meals or any other expenses like that. Some airlines may offer at least partial, if not full, compensation. Some hotels may be more generous. And a lot depends on the type of traveler you are. Do you have status in their frequent flyer program? Were you traveling on a first class or business class type of ticket? If you are a more valuable customer to the airline, they may be more generous with you. But if it's bad weather, they're not obligated to do anything. You can try to make your case, and sometimes they will at least offer some partial credit.
Yeah. All right. Henry, the frustrating thing is we all know it's partly weather, but it's also partly lots of other stuff that,
Right.
Yeah. But what can we do? Thank you so much for all the great information and insider tips. Really enjoy the conversation. Take good care.
Thank you. You too.
All right. Bye-bye.